Welcome back to the HOKA Outpost here at the Coffee Bar in Palisades, Tahoe. It is Tuesday of Western States Race Week, and we are getting even more hyped up than we usually are. My name is Dylan Bowman, joined, of course, by Corrine Malcolm. Corrine, happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Happy to be here.
Happy Tuesday. And also Tim Tollefson back in studio. Tim, it's the preview show. Are you feeling good?
4 days to go, and I can't wait.
All right, so quick run of show before we get started here. This is the official Western States preview show from Freetrail. Excuse me, my voice is reeling, but we'll let it rest a little bit before race day. Anyway, we are rock solid here. Don't worry about us. Thanks to the team that we have behind the scenes, Mr. Ryan Thrower on the ones and twos, Harmony Bowman, Travis Longcar, who are just off camera as well. It does take an entire team to make this possible. Big thank you to HOKA, obviously, for building the sickest trail running podcasting studio in the history of time here at the Coffee Bar. Thanks to Coffeebar for hosting us throughout the week. We are, again, going to preview the race course, conditions, and the characters, the 3 C's of the 2025 Western States 100. We do this Tuesday of race week. It feels like every single year. Tomorrow we'll be back with the Champions edition of Trailgating. We'll have Jim Walmsley, Scott Jurek, Hal Kerner, Magda Boulay, and Kat Bradley on tomorrow's show. You're not going to want to miss that. We're going live at 3:30 p.m. every single day. And then on Thursday, of course, is the HOKA Shakeout Run, 7:30 a.m. from right here at Coffee Bar. We'll do our show Thursday afternoon. That's sort of our wrap-up, final thoughts and prediction show. And then immediately after the show is the Chuck Wagon Beer Mile, brought to you by your friends at Freetrail and Death March Running Co. So if you're here in Palisades, Tahoe, make sure you come to Coffee Bar at 5 p.m. on Thursday. Chug some sparkling waters, have an adult beverage. You can run around the village a couple of times if you feel like it, or you can just bask in the energy. We always finish it up with the 100-mile happy hour. It's become a Freetrail tradition here at Coffee Bar on Thursday. Before launching into it, make sure you go to fantasy.freetrail.com. Probably after you listen to us prognosticate here today, you're going to want to navigate to fantasy.freetrail.com. Pick 10 deep for the men and the women. We've got huge prize packages. Harmony's going to put in the chat exactly what's on the line for the prize packages, but a lot of great stuff. And also, when you're at fantasy.freetrail.com, navigate to the stats tab, drop down to splits, and then select the Western States 100, because the king of trail technology, Freetrail's advanced analytics department, Mr. Travis Longcar, has created the world's best split analysis feature on the internet, okay? Fantasy.freetrail.com. You're going to want to spend all weekend there. Certainly Corrine and I will while we are in studio. Am I forgetting anything before we launch in here, team?
I think we're ready to go.
Oh, one other thing. We've done a bunch of fun athlete interviews in the last 24 hours. Rod Farvard, Esther Chilog, Hannah Allgood, and we just recorded with the champion from 2022, Adam Peterman. Go check out those athlete interviews on your own time after the show. Okay, I want to start with the weather here, team, because Tim has clearly been hitting the refresh button. Ryan's going to pull up a quick graphic with the most up-to-date forecast. This is showing down in Auburn. Tim, what do you want to say about the conditions, the weather conditions?
Well, I don't want to be accused of insider trading, but there was a gentleman by the name of Rod Farvard asking me to feverishly just hit refresh. And currently on Wonderground, which is the official weather station for Western States, it is saying 96-degree high on Saturday the 28th. So that is 2 degrees higher than just yesterday.
Yep.
You've been hitting refresh a lot.
I'm wearing out my buttons.
Yeah. So again, a couple degrees warmer than last year. We'll talk about a little bit later about how that impacts the race. One other thing to flag before we get started, of course, Western States starts here in Palisades, Tahoe, and finishes in Auburn. So the official Western States weather forecast, which you can actually find on Craig Thornley's Twitter account, shows the temperatures that are expected all along the course, including at critical places like Forest Hill, which sits at an elevation of 4,000 feet. It's usually a couple degrees cooler at Forest Hill than it is in Auburn. So the high that you see is just in Auburn, and there will be different temperature fluctuations along the course, something that maybe isn't totally intuitive to our audience. Speaking of the course, Ryan's going to bring up another graphic here. We did this last year, but we have to do it again. The Western States course is uniquely challenging. Corrine, maybe just talk about the different sections of the course and what makes it so unique and challenging.
Yeah, I think a lot of us historically break it up to the high country, which is the start to Robinson Flat, the canyons. And okay, just as like an aside, before I ever came out to Western States, I had heard about the canyons of Western States, and I was convinced that it was like Utah River Canyon, like just like, you know, walls of rock. And so I was in for a surprise when I ran the Canyons 100K in 2018 and found out that it was actually the American River Canyon. Yep. But lots of ups and downs on your way to Forest Hill. You then hit Cal Street, and we kind of call those, I guess, like the foothills as you make your way onto this quote unquote speedier sections of the course, the final 20 to 30 miles or so from I guess like partway down Cal Street to the finish.
Yep.
But and each section is unique in that they all pose different challenges based on the weather, based on the conditions. That includes the conditions in the high country. Is it a high snow year? Is it a really dry year up high? Is it wet? How soon are your feet going to get wet up there? Traction is not allowed, i.e. no micro spikes, no poles, etc. So when it's snowy out there, that can be a real issue. There is minimal snow out there, but it does sound like it's probably wet in the high country. And then depending on how hot it is, the canyon section from Robinson Flat to Forest Hill or so is when people really start to overheat in the peak of the day in the most exposed section of the course and generally where some of those hottest temperatures are.
Tim, real quick, just to set you up, you've run in the high country this, late spring into the summer, so you've seen that. I want to hear about that. But you also have grown up running on the Western States course, so you know it very well. You're a two-time finisher yourself. Add some color to what Corrine is saying here, specifically focusing on, what makes this a unique course.
Absolutely. So it is typically broken down into those three sections: the high country, the first 30, the canyons, almost the next 25, and then it's Cal Street and the runnable sections from the river to the finish. What makes this race uniquely, I think, challenging for a lot of people is on paper, they see 100 miles with 18,000 feet of climbing and a net descent of 23,000. And compared to maybe some of our European counterparts, that seems, maybe JV or, kind of like minor league. But what you can't underestimate or what you can't understand, state enough, is that the terrain itself is punishing. The California carpet, that we like to call it, runs like concrete. And so people, when they are descending these canyons, if they're not careful, they really punish their body. They can do a lot of musculoskeletal damage to the quads, to the calves, to even your low back. Yeah. That by the time you get to the runnable, let's see, Cal Street or past the river, which on paper, 20 miles with 2,400 feet of gain is almost pancake flat, people are gassed. They got nothing left in the tank. Yeah. And on, it kind of depends on the year, but the high country is also deceptively challenging. Yep. Similarly, it's not super high, but you do go over 8,000 feet as you crest the escarpment. And then I was out there in the high country just a couple of days ago, and while Corrine is correct, there's not much snow, there is a lot of water on the trail. So our runners can expect that your feet are going to be soaked by mile 6. Yep. So don't be alarmed, but that's another challenge where it's very rocky, rutted, rooty, and there's some steep ups and downs. And often in the high country, people can kind of go into zone 3, 4 and burn themselves up, waste some precious glycogen and not realize it because there's so much adrenaline, so much excitement that you're running Western States, but not realizing you're kind of basting the quads, like we've talked with Joe Yuhan last year about. You're kind of priming the Western States killing machine, and then when it should be runnable, you have nothing left.
Yeah. So what Tim just mentioned is an article that was published on irunfar.com, I think 11 years ago when Joe was in here last year. I think it was the 10-year anniversary of it being published. I'd love to see the traffic stats on that website this time of the year. Somebody put that link in the chat. It is must-read material. It's actually a 2-part article. It will really help you understand the Western States course. But what Corrine and Tim just described, I can certainly attest to from personal experience myself. The Western States course absolutely shreds you for a couple of different reasons. It's very hard to get right, and you have to be on the gas the whole time, and it requires a very well-rounded skill set. The high country is like a mountain runner's terrain, right? The middle section, it's getting hot, you're getting fatigued, it's where the highest concentration of vertical ascending and descending is. And then at the end, when the trail is as fast and runnable as anything you could hope for, if you have miscalculated even the slightest, it will eat you alive. Tim, I know you've experienced that yourself. I certainly have too. And so it really is an execution ball game. I think all of us would agree, having finished this race ourselves. If I look at my career, having raced UTMB and Hard Rock, Western States, even though it takes 10 hours less than Hard Rock in a lot of cases, in my mind, is harder on the body, harder on the system, harder to recover from. So an interesting thing to keep in mind for our audience here today, like when you look at the course profile that Ryan had on the screen, doesn't look like there's a bunch of monster climbs. It's a gently descending trail. Looks are very deceiving in that case. So the course is very difficult. I think also, like you mentioned, Tim, the high country is underestimated. Average elevation of 7,000 feet in the beginning of the race, and then you finish at 1,000 feet. So again, if you miscalculate the altitude exposure up high, if you miscalculate your energy expenditure in the middle of the race, you are gonna suffer in the heat in the foothills. One thing I wanted to also touch on before we move on from the course is I have a very specific take on the course and the race that I'll toss to you here, Tim. My thesis is that the Mosquito Fire made Western States way faster. Do you want to share with the audience why that is?
So, well, I'd be curious to hear yours as well, but I do agree. I think that the Mosquito Fire did have an actual positive effect on the course in a few ways, honestly. One is that fire burned basically, 19 miles of the Western States course, kind of from Mission Bluff area all the way down towards just south of Forest Hill and Cal Street. And what it did was, well, in one thing, we had to, collectively as a Western States organization and a bunch of other nonprofits go out there and really rehab the trail and clean it up. And now the underfooting is much smoother than it used to be. There's been a lot of work done to actually make it kind of almost like run like a track. Also, I think you were mentioning just from the exposure from, burning up some of the vegetation, it's also changed things. I don't know if you want to jump in on that
Actually,
part.
I think Corrine wants to mention this. But on the underfoot condition, basically what you're saying is, and we should say for the audience, and it was after the 2023 race, right? That there was what they call the Mosquito Fire, which burned 19 miles of the course, as you said. And what that mandated, what that meant was that the Western States Trail Crew, which is an army of volunteers who love getting out there and swinging
people
axes.
who weren't doing it to get, quote unquote, the volunteer hours for a 100-mile race, which is very common in Western U.S. races, is to do an 8-hour volunteer shift as part of your entry into the race. And I was talking to the volunteer crews 2 years ago about that, and they said, we haven't actually signed that many permission slips from it. People are just out here putting in the work.
So what I wanted to tee you up on, Corrine, that 19 miles of the course is objectively, the trail is in better shape because they had to rebuild the whole thing. And so it's a really, really nice trail. But the converse of that, you could say, Corrine, is the fire burned all the vegetation. Therefore, the solar intensity.
Yeah, the solar intensity is a big deal. So solar radiation is one of those best ways our body gets heated up in a pretty profound way. My old roommate used to say, the sun is hot. And it is. The sun is hot. You notice that on a warm day where all of a sudden you step into the shade and it feels like it's 20 degrees cooler. So what happens when you burn 19 miles of the race course is that there is no shade now on that descent down to El Dorado, on the climb into Michigan Bluff, on the climb out of Michigan Bluff, even leaving Forest Hill on Cal Street for a little bit. And so that section increases the rate of exposure for these athletes. And so they have to be a little bit more mindful maybe when it comes to what is their strategy for staying cool in that section? Are they using greater sun protection, i.e., sun shirts, hats, sleeves, etc.? Not just using water to cool off and use that as a way to manage it, but it is a big deal out there. And so yes, the underfoot conditions are, I think, substantially better than they have been in years past, but there's no pine trees out there anymore that provide shade. There's no manzanita on your way into Michigan Bluff, and the road leaving Michigan Bluff now, I remember running from shade patch to shade patch, racing it, and there is not a tree to be seen for miles
totally
around.
different.
It is crazy. Yeah. So I do think that those things are in contrast with one another, and while one might run a lot faster, I think on a day of especially high heat and or no cloud cover whatsoever, that section could be much more challenging for many runners as well, particularly runners who are mismanaging their heat strategy.
And this is where I think it actually impacts the mid to back of the packers more, because the elite runners, women and men, are now getting through the canyons and into Forest Hill at 1 o'clock, 1:30, 2 o'clock, not at the hottest part of the day. So they're benefiting from the underfoot improvement conditions, but not suffering as much from the solar radiation, as Corrine was saying. And then also, I think it's important, touching on the Mosquito Fire in 2022. And a lot of people don't recognize that fire really put the 2023 edition of Western States in jeopardy. And it was only because of this partnership between the Western States Trail Foundation, Auburn State Recreation Area, the Forest Service, and a bunch of other nonprofits, that they were able to collectively come together and rebuild 19 miles of trail in less than 8 months, which is absolutely insane. That normally doesn't happen, but it's due to the partnerships. And I'm going to give a plug. You should come listen to us talk about this with Craig Thornley tomorrow at TrailCon. We're going to talk about, the importance of collaboration and partnerships in public land access. But I think also Craig was out there at, it's called, it's the week before Western States, so this last weekend, they were at the camp out, which is one of the final stewardship opportunities, and there were over 40 people out there that buffed out the trail during the snowstorm. Didn't stop them, but they buffed out and brushed from Cougar Rock, which is about mile 20, all the way to Michigan Bluff, another 35 miles of improvements to the trail. And so I think that combination and what you were saying, and then also after, we didn't quite touch on it, but at from Alt towards
Auburn Lake Trails, it's about mile 85
going down towards Quarry Road at mile 90, that also has been improved. It's been widened. It is about like 8 feet wide, perfectly. It's even better than California carpet. So I think all of these conditions and improvements to the trail itself are going to lead to that potential for men and women at the top end of the field to really start sniffing out those course records, if that's kind of one of the objectives.
All right, Craig, you got to stop making the course faster, bro. We just came
They're
from
working
TrailCon.
on some stuff to make the course even faster.
Yeah,
so,
I know, the high country.
Hold on to your horses on that one.
We just left TrailCon where Topher Gaylord just delivered the most riveting keynote speech I have ever seen, in which he recognized Craig Thornley and his amazing leadership of the Western States 100. And they actually showed a clip of Craig out doing trail work in the Burns section in a snowstorm, and he just had this huge smile on his face, and it was just like, he is made for this job, and we're so lucky to have him. And before we move off this, I should say that Mosquito Fire put not only the Western States 100 in jeopardy, it put the towns of Michigan Bluff and Forest Hill in jeopardy, and only
lots
because
of homes were lost in Michigan Bluff.
Yeah, heroic firefighters saved most of the property there. It would have been an absolute tragedy if that thing would have engulfed both those communities, and we are lucky to have so many great people who care about the race, care about this terrain, to be out there taking care of it, both within the organization and outside of it. Any other comments on the course before we move on? Or the conditions? I mean, I think what we could touch on before we move on and talk about some of the athletes is the way dealing with heat has changed over the years too, because not only has the course gotten faster, the way the athletes are both preparing for the heat has gotten more sophisticated, and the way they manage it during the race has become more sophisticated. Maybe you guys could both provide a comment or two on how you would be approaching it if you were in the race this year.
Yeah, I mean, out of the gates, I would say don't listen to the people saying that 94, 95, 96 degrees is not hot. It's incredibly hot. So any of the strategies or the things that you've talked to your crew about utilizing, you absolutely need to implement these things. You should even be doing that in an 80-degree day. When you're out there running, it is hot. Your body's going to be generating a lot of heat. And it has been fascinating because, comparing even just 6-7 years ago, when maybe we were kind of at our peak states, kind of prowess, we were experimenting with things, but not the way people are now. And I think it's because of this data-driven kind of approach to the sport and professionalization of recognizing that, hey, I'm pouring so much time, energy, money, and emotion into this. I want to get the most out of it. And so people are really turning over every stone. And I'll let Corrine talk about the actual science behind it, as you literally wrote the chapter about heat management. But I think we're going to see all of the strategies and maybe even some new ones out there this year.
Yeah.
I mean, new and not new. I was training for my first 100 mile back in 2017, and I was doing a lot of this stuff then that they're doing now. It's when I was in grad school studying environmental physiology. So I love that we are we've got goldfish memory or something, and we constantly think that things are super new age. They're using a lot of the same strategies that have been around for a long time, some that are more hyped than others, but most of the best way to be heat acclimated on race day, or not heat acclimated, the best way to be to cool during the race is to come in heat acclimated, is what I would say. And so that means passive heat or active heat. And I mean, we used to maybe scoff at active heat, saying, well, is that as efficient as using passive heat? And the jury's still out in a lot of ways. There's like maybe a thermal tolerance difference. And what that means is that you're just like more mentally comfortable in that hot environment. But from a physiological standpoint, you kind of want to do the smallest dose possible to get the maximum effect.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of like mental prep that goes into some of the active heat that we're seeing a lot of athletes do, and maybe active heat on a trainer is a lot easier than getting into a sauna.
Yep.
If you don't
That's
have
what
one,
we were just talking to Peterman about.
Easier to get into a hot tub, right? You might not have that available to you readily, and so getting on the bike trainer with a bunch of clothes on is way easier. But the issue is, are you losing your primary run by doing that? We've got a lot of athletes now in the race at the highest end that are full-time athletes, which affords them the ability to not be time limited in their activity. Historically, athletes have been time limited, and so you've got one opportunity to train that day. You're not going to blow it by doing an activity overdressed where you can't get the same quality run in. And so I think the big difference now is that we've got athletes that are less time limited, so they can do more active sessions because it's not affecting their primary training stimulus for the day anymore. So I think it's been taken to the extremes a little bit, and the science will say that more is not better. That you want the minimum effective dose. You want to make sure that you can protect your training. You want to be able to recover from it. And then there's probably responders and non-responders on top of that. And so it is super, super fascinating. But I think that there's no one doing anything that other people aren't doing is the thing. Like they're all like, everyone is doing heat pre-race, and that's important. Everyone's going to be using cooling stuff out there, be it ice bandanas, ice in the pack, ice in the sleeves, staying wet, providing shade for yourself via hats and coverage. None of that is new in the past 9 years. But I do think that more and more people are coming around to it.
Okay, so a couple of things before we move on. We just talked to Rod yesterday, and he said that he saw a 10% improvement in VO2 max. I think that's what he said, right? Something to that effect by just doing his heat protocol leading into the race. Also, famously, whatever it was 10 years ago, Rob Krar was famous for saying, I don't do heat training, I do heat management. In other words, he was never getting in the sauna, he was never getting in the hot tub, he's never doing the puffy jacket runs in the middle of the summer. All he did was stuff ice in every sleeve and hat he could put his hands on during race day. I think things have changed. I mean, at least a little bit, moderately. And I think, also it reminds me of something that has not been really shared publicly enough, but is new for this year's Western States. We've seen in the last couple of years where as these pro athletes are getting more sophisticated with their strategies, they have their pacer or crew go down Bath Road, which is the 1 mile approach uphill to the Forest Hill aid station. Typically, pacers and crews have been able to go meet their athlete down there, put an ice vest on them, put a new bandana around their neck as they run into the Forest Hill aid station. That's no longer allowed, folks, okay? Nope. It's a small detail, but it's no longer allowed. The aid station is now at the top of Bath Road to the top of California Street. Yep. So just want to make sure that is communicated. But Corrine and I in the broadcast booth all day on Saturday will be commenting on the cooling strategies of the athletes as they take on this 96-degree day.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be really cool to see who plays it right and who takes risks. I think that most people aren't taking risks now, right? And there's so much ice out there between crewable aid stations as well. The race organization has, 80 pounds of ice per runner?
Something like that.
Something crazy.
It might even be more. We'll ask Thornley tomorrow.
And
it's a lot.
That's down at El Dorado Creek, they walk into that aid station and they have ice down there and they will shove it into your pack, into your arm sleeves, down your sports bra. There is no excuse to not be icing down.
Yeah. And it is something where we've seen in the sport almost this F1ification of aid stations where people get in and out within seconds. But a race like Western States, if you overlook those small details, like not taking an extra 30 seconds, maybe a minute to properly cool down, that can really come back and haunt you.
Totally. And the other rule change this year is that pacers can no longer drop down from Green Gate to meet a runner on the far side of the river. So your pacer has to cross the river and go up to Green Gate, or they can go up Driver's Flat Road, and the racer would have to go up to Green Gate solo to meet the other pacer. Couple little rule changes here. Anyway, let's start talking about some of the athletes. Before we do, a big thank you to our sponsors at HOKA for making all of this possible, including building us the sickest YouTube and podcast set in the history of trail running. You got to go check out the new Mafate X. It just dropped, a max cushion shoe that still feels super fast. Like you could run a 50K or sub ultra if you wanted to. Plus you could probably take it to Cocodona or these 200-mile races. A very versatile shoe, carbon plate, dual density, super foams, Vibram outsole. It's got all the bells and whistles. A really, really nice product. You can see it behind Corrine here on the shelf. Check it out, hoka.com, Mafate X. Big thank you to HOKA. Starting with the women. Okay, we're launching into the real preview now. I've broken it into a few categories here. So I want to start with the returning top 10. I'll just list the 5 and then pass it to you if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have Fuzhou Zhang, who finished second in one of the fastest times ever. Esther Chilog in third last year, F3. Emily Hoggood was 5th. Ida Nilsson was 6th. Heather Jackson was 7th. And Priscilla Forgy, will remind our audience, pulled out yesterday. She was 9th last year. She's no longer in the race, unfortunately. So we have 5 returning top 10s. Corrine, Fuzhou, Esther, Emily, Ida, Heather.
I mean, just a question though, and both the men's and the women's side, we have 5 returning on the women's side, 4 returning on the men's side. Is that the lowest return we've ever had from the top 10?
It has to be.
And it's mostly not elected.
Yeah. Yeah, so the two...
it's got to be very close, yeah.
The 2 elected non-returners on the men's side are Tyler and John Albin. The non-returners on the women's side are Leah and Rachel, who did so because of the...
Yeah, so Katie Scheid also, and Priscilla, right? So like the people who are not returning, but the elected out, they technically took their spots and then are pregnant, and so they took pregnancy deferral. So they will be allowed back into the race at the year of their choosing. But yeah, that like it compounds a little bit.
So of the 20, it's Katie, Tyler, and John Albin who elected not to return.
And Ingvild Kaspersen.
And Ingvild, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, but I think that's very interesting as well, is that we have so few returners. Maybe average for elected non-returners, 2 and 2 or so is about right, I think. But then to have another 2 to 3 men and 2 to 3 women not making it back to the start line for whatever reason does feel like a big hit. But at the same time, we were talking about this before we went live, and we're like, but man, there's still so many people.
The depth is deep.
Well, and the analysis that Travis did proves it. So anyway, the returning top 10, Corrine, you get us started. Fuzhou, Esther, Emily, Ida, Heather. There's a lot to say about all 5.
I mean, I think one of the biggest things of note is that Fuzhou and Esther have the 3rd and 4th fastest time all time on the course for women. I think that was Esther's 2nd time being 3rd at the race, so she really knows how to run this very, very smoothly. So I do think that they're coming in as like the odds-on favorite in a lot of ways. I think because of that. You then have Emily Hoggood, who's going for her 5th top 10 finish in a row, which you do not see a whole lot of that anymore, I would say, just because there's other races to do and it's really hard to get back in, more and more so. The other thing with Emily, though, historically, she's that consummate 5th place, that consummate 3rd place, very, very steady, but hadn't gotten that big win. Super impressed with her run at Canyons back in April, where she went out aggressive in the lead from the gun and had nothing to lose, right? Didn't need a golden ticket, was already back in the race. Learning to win is a big deal. And Emily Hoggood, I feel like in April, needed to practice learning to win, flexing that muscle a little bit. And she did that at Canyons, I think, really re-entering her in that conversation for the win, not just a podium, not just another top 10. So really, really excited about that. And then obviously Ida and Heather, I think, learning year over year how to run this race. They are also part of those returning athletes. 3 of them are 40 or older. Yep. So the Masters race is always on as well, but the Masters race is not.
Yeah, because Esther just moved into the Masters category.
Yep, and it's not, obviously, they do not care as much about that as maybe we do, but it is really cool to see women racing really well into their 40s at the highest end of the sport, including mothers. Esther's a mom of 2. Her girls will be here this weekend. So really excited to see Ida and Heather continue to improve with more and more experience on this race. And I think Ida in particular is very, very hungry to move up a number of spots.
Yep.
Absolutely. And it's really impressive when you look at Esther in particular. Like, her average here is now 16:55 for 2 performances.
Goodness
that
gracious.
ties my PR at this race.
Yes.
And I have full confidence that she's going to probably, be itching to go even faster this year. And talking with Ida, I mean, Ida's had an incredible build, and she's one of those athletes that, if you look at the span of her career, it spanned 20 plus years, from NCAA champion in the steeplechase indoors to now course record holder for Masters here, and she ran 16:56 last year. And I think that she's one of those that does very well in the heat, and it will be her 3rd attempt, and it's very possible that she's going to be knocking on that, lowering the women's Masters record.
Her own Masters record.
Masters record.
And
by
she barely
quite a
missed
bit.
it at her debut here. And I also love that about Ida, is that her debut was as a 41-year-old with a long career on the trails as well. So really, really excited to see that. I think there was one more thing I wanted to add about that.
While you think
Grade
about it,
5.
Corrine, one thing that I think is interesting too, of the 5 women who are returning from the top 10 last year, 1 American. Fu Zhao, Ida, Emily, of course, is from Zimbabwe, though lives here in the U.S. Ida is Swedish. So only 1 returning American in the top 10, Heather Jackson. Very interesting.
Yeah, the women's top 10 has been very international since we returned post-pandemic, really. I feel like in 2021, it's had a really, really strong international flair in the top 10, which we love to see. We love to see the rise of the Chinese and Asian athletes. We love to see the rise of the South and Central American athletes as well in this. And so continued to watch that growth here. What I was going to say again was back to Fu Zhao and Esther coming back in. I think they're both on the record of saying that they want to run sub 15:30, which I'm sorry, Tim, is going to be a massive, maybe like household PR for this group of people.
Yes.
Oh, big time. It'll
But-
blow us out of the water.
And again, I think I said this yesterday on our show as well, is that is faster than Killian's ever run.
My PR is 15:35, I think. So slower than Courtney.
That's
I
fair.
finished 3rd place that year.
I know. With a beard.
So the course was way slower back then. Way slower.
Before super shoes.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right. So anyway, we've said enough about those returning top 5. I think, of those women, any of them have a chance to win the race. It's very, very exciting. And it fits the theme that we talked about yesterday about how the women's race is wide open. Speaking more about the other categories of contenders that we have here today. We've got the international squad, which I think is really interesting here. So we've got Johanna Antilles from Norway, Fiona Pascal from Great Britain, Rosanna Buschauer from Germany, Martina Milnarczyk from Poland, I think it is. I don't have it written down.
Yeah, Poland.
And then Caitlin Fielder. Of those internationals, there's 300-mile debuts in the internationals. You get to start.
Okay, and Hao Ha. Do we
And
mention?
Hao Ha, thank you.
Who's Vietnamese, and I mean, again, my Roman Empire is the friendship she has with Fu Zhao. They've been living and training together for, I think, 2 months at this point, and it's magical.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this new crop of international athletes. Nancy Zhang, I guess, is also part of that mix.
New Zealand.
But
Thank
she's
you.
been here before. She's been here before and is looking for a little bit of redemption. But again, part of the reason why these golden tickets are going abroad and have gone abroad for the last couple of years was with the advent of No More Ultra Trail World Tour. We wanted to make sure the race still continued to bring in international competition, and so that's why we go to Chianti and Tarawera and CCC and Doyenthanon in years past to continue to make sure that we have athletes coming in from elsewhere. And so, we're seeing Johanna Antilles from Finland and Fiona Pascal coming in from Chianti earlier this year. That's hugely exciting. So I think that building that international squad brings a lot of new flavor, new just excitement to the field in a big way. And so,
And frankly, we just don't know a lot about these
we
women.
learn a lot about them during this race.
It's going to be so exciting. One person I would just love to spend a minute on is Caitlin Fielder. The reason is because I just kind of have a feeling about her. Corinne and I and Ryan were at Tarawera earlier this year, and I remember we made the comment, Caitlin Fielder is fast. Yes, she went toe-to-toe with Ruth Croft for like
pushed her
80K of that 100K there, got her golden ticket, accepted it. She is a Kiwi by birth, but she lives in Girona. I don't know how long she's been here, but Girona is known as a hot place in Europe. It's also a place with a great culture of sport. Caitlin is as professional as they come, and we'll all remember that there's a great tradition of 100-mile debutantes here at Western States who nail it on their first try. Caitlin Fielder. I don't want to start making predictions, but I have a feeling about Caitlin.
Yeah, I think the other piece of that puzzle too for Caitlin is that there's a little bit of like blissful naivety that you get when you haven't run 100 miles.
Absolutely.
And it's like, you don't know how bad it can get. And so I think it's just like, you run and you see what happens. And that is a really special, like, one-time experience. And so I do think that races like Western States is a very special opportunity for that debutante runner to have a really, really amazing 100-mile experience. And so, Caitlin is probably at the top of that list of 100-mile debutantes at Western States this year. We saw great stuff from like Ingvild Kaspersen last year, Caleb Olson last year, debuting in the 100-mile at Western States. And I think we're looking to Caitlin Fielder to do something very similar here as well.
Eyeball emojis. Moving on to the next little category that I put together, the experienced contenders here. And this is an amazing bunch of women. Riley Brady playing a hot hand coming in. Tara Dower, same thing. Keely Henninger, been around the game for a long time, as good as it gets when she's on. Abby Hall, also like working her way back, has an amazing head on her shoulders. Shea Aquilano, 23 years old.
Got into the lottery.
Yep. And then smashed the course record at Gorge. And the amazing Hannah Allgood, who we had in studio here. Those are 6 names. I would love you guys to comment on any of them.
Oh my gosh, where do you start with that? It's pretty incredible.
Start with Riley.
Okay. Well, Riley, they came in. They're coming in right now with the win at Javelina, the win at Black Canyon in stout times of 14:19, and then the Javelina was just nasty, 8:16 at Black Canyons. That's ridiculous. And I think we were talking about learning to win. And speaking with Riley last year at UTMB, didn't have the best performance, but in the last 9 months has shown that they know how to win, which is really incredible.
Yeah, this course suits them, I think, particularly well. Last time that they were here, had a ton of GI upset, and has really figured out that they have some very specific nutrition needs, i.e. a little bit maybe less carbohydrate per hour, and really is not a salty sweater, apparently. And so needs a lot less sodium, and that was causing a ton of vomiting. I think I was like,
so interesting and counterintuitive.
What's the goal? And they were like, not vomiting today. And I was like, love it.
But
that's
where
great.
it really highlights like the specificity of what you need. Don't mirror what your competitors are doing. And also, for the first time, they have a proper sponsor, have the support, have the confidence building. So I think that even though it's a debut here, or not debut, but it's coming off of this heater, I would expect that they're going to have a pretty stellar day out there.
Yeah, I think. So it's been 3 races in a row where Riley has nailed it. Javelina, where they were just shy of Camille Herron's course record there, within striking distance. Black Canyon, where they smashed the course record by 30 minutes. And then Quad Rock, also sort of a local race in Colorado, but that's been around for 10 plus years, that a lot of fast people have run. And Riley finished, I think, in the top 5 overall or something like that. So Riley playing a hot hand. We could talk about this again when we talk about Seth, but I think it's almost a blessing and a curse, right? Like when you have 3 of those in a row, you feel like, okay, I've got this whole thing figured out. I've got this whole sport figured out. And then right when you start believing that, the sport punches you straight in the face and says, no, you don't.
No one's getting punched in the face this weekend. Everyone's running great.
I'm sure both Riley and Seth.
That's a hot take.
I'm sure both Riley and Seth are cognizant of that. But I think it's interesting to think about is like, when you're playing a hot hand, yeah, you have confidence, but does that confidence make you make poor decisions based on it? Anyway, interesting. The one person who Riley got the better of, but who also had an amazing race at Black Canyon, Tara Dower. We spoke about her yesterday, a very, very interesting athlete, certainly a contender to win this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were all blown away when she showed up to Black Canyon and absolutely smashed it in a big way, also going under that course record. But remember, coming off of an overall AT FKT.
Yeah.
Like very different races, right? Like, or events, you should say. One is a 40+ day effort, and one is a, hot day out in the sun, very, very fast. But back that up with a really great run at Lake Sonoma as well this spring. And I think that if the day plays out, I don't know that anyone is tougher than Tara Dower. It's like, someone's like, who are you afraid to race? Tara Dower might be the first person that comes to mind.
Terrifying.
Not because she's fast, but because I don't know that anyone is
like
grittier,
Zach Miller
grittier or tougher.
You're not
going
to have tougher.
No, you're not going to. It's like racing Jessie Diggins skiing. Like, that girl can go to the well. Tara Dower can go to the well in a way that is really, you can't learn. I think it's innate in a lot of ways. And while she is fast, she is also just the grittiest, I want to swear, person out there.
Did we just label a new moniker for her? Terrifying Dower?
Terrifying Dower.
I think we did.
Terror the
but
Terror.
I agree. I would not want to race
Terror
Dower.
Dower.
She's the type of competitor where if everyone puts their hand in the fire, she's going to be the last one to pull it out.
100%.
And she's like laughing at you. She's like smiling and laughing. It's a whole thing.
She's a competitor too.
No,
I mean,
she is. She looks all bubbly and nice, but man, she's going to be gunning for it out there, and that is very exciting and scary.
all right. So Keely, Henninger, Abby Hall, Shea Aquilano, and Hannah Allgood. Maybe just note from me, you know, I've known Keely a long time. I remember telling her on the track after she finished 9th, it was probably 5 years ago now. I think it was the first year.
2021.
Yeah. First year we did the broadcast. I said, you're going to win this race someday. I hope Keely is ready for a good one. Abby Hall, we know she's, you know, worked hard to get back into the race. Shea Aquilano is one of those, brings extreme
youngest
youth.
person in the race.
Yep, 23 years old, has the NCAA D1 pedigree, coming also off a huge course record, punched her ticket to Team USA. Then Hannah Allgood, winning
Coach.
the Canyons 50K. Coach Allgood, only done 2 50Ks coming in. I'd love to have you say a few words about those 4.
I mean, love them.
Yeah.
Right? Love them, rooting for them. Really excited for Abby to take another big swing at Western States in general. She's been here before and really nail 100. I feel like Abby's been an amazing 100K runner, and she's got all the talent in the world to be an amazing 100-mile runner, and I just don't think we've seen that potential. We've seen the potential, but we haven't seen her execute on it yet. So really looking to Abby to put something together this weekend that I think we know she's very, very capable of. Keely's in that same boat, right? We saw that with that 9th place, a great run, super, super solid. But I do think that she's been back twice now where she was in amazing position, sitting in podium spots, only to literally break her ankle, only to dislocate her shoulder just outside of the Rocky Chucky River crossing, and spent 30 minutes trying to relocate it by herself because if she received medical aid outside of the aid station, she'd be disqualified. Like, how brutal is that?
Also a tough mofo.
And fell in podium position.
Yep.
And so it's like the gal can do it type of thing. And so I'm really excited for that. I'm really excited to see Shea in the race.
Yeah.
Shea was going to get a golden ticket at some point into this race, but to get in through the lottery at 23 or 24, and she's been running ultras for as long as I have, I think, at this point, which is super impressive.
And we've been talking about it all week and last week about, you know, learning how to win. And winning is a skill that you really need to cultivate. And when I was looking through the women and the men's fields, I was actually kind of thinking about, okay, if we were to break it out, like the academics of learning to win, and we created our own state's university, I broke these women into categories of like the professors, the PhD candidates, the grad students, and the undergrads.
Tell me.
Like Abby Hall is one of those where I wanted to put her into the PhD candidates because of her resume, but because of that the almost 2-year-long stint with injury, like it keeps her in my mind in that grad students, but she's on the precipice of being like actually being a PhD like candidate. And I think people, you know, often do forget that she was on a world tear before her freak accident, and she required surgery and that long kind of sabbatical. And I'm one that's very cautious of taking or putting too much weight into Strava stalking. But if you look at Abby Hall's Strava over the last 2 months, it is verbatim of what Katie Scheid did before last year's 15:46 performance and the second fastest of all time.
I saw the 37 miler she put in a couple weeks ago.
And so, you know, again, like, you know, each athlete's going to respond differently, but you got to believe she's been putting in the work, and maybe she's flying under the radar slightly, which could be a benefit, but I would not be surprised if she's actually mixing up at the front of the field with any of these top contenders that we were talking about that are returning and sniffing out that, you know, maybe sub 16 performance.
Yeah, it's super, super interesting. And just again, just to put a little bit more love on her name, Marianne Hogan as well.
I was just going to say, we totally overlooked Marianne.
We haven't overlooked her. We just kind of skirted right by her. And again, she hasn't been back here for a couple of years. She put together an amazing race at Canyons, like going toe-to-toe with Emily Hoggood and really being in the battle that whole time to get that golden ticket to get back here. In my mind, Marianne is someone who kind of, I call it sandbagging, where you're like, I don't know, I'm not in that great a shape. And then you put together a Canyons performance like that, and I'm like, whatever, you're in great shape.
She just never screws it up.
No, she doesn't. And again, can go to the well. We've seen her, you know, put her body through a lot to get these performances out of her. Multi-time UTMB podium, has been on the podium here at Western States before. She is really fast, and I think this course suits her really, really well. And I think that she'll be a factor early in the race and is going to be fighting for that podium all the way in.
Yeah, I think she's been around here for the last couple of months, all the way since Canyons too, with sort of a stint in Boulder. Anyway, Marianne Hogan for sure in the mix as the contenders. Final word from me. I just want to add a little special shout out to Coach Hannah Allgood. We talked to her yesterday. Girl is ready, man. Intentionally only did 250Ks coming in. We talked about the importance of peaking at the right time, me making the comment that in my career, I always felt like I had my best race one race too early. For her, you know, she had that great. She did a fun local race in Marin where she smashed it, broke the course record. But then she won the Canyons 50K in a solid field, beating Tabor Hemming, you know, Jen Lichter, etc. Hannah's got everything it takes. You know, we've talked about
Hannah.
This being a speed mixed with strength course.
She's
Hannah
so strong.
is speed plus strength personified. The men's race. Starting with the returning top 10, only 4 men in here, but certainly 4 contenders, certainly 4 really compelling characters. Rod Farvard being paced by a certain Tim Tollefson. Tim, give us all the inside info on Farvard.
Spill the beans.
How deep do we want to go? It's, I think Rod, I mean, you had a wonderful conversation with Rod yesterday, and I think he highlighted, you know, kind of, he really, he recounted the last 360 days that he's been through, which consisted of, you know, some pretty incredible highs, some kind of lower lows, but he's really managed it very well mentally. And I think what I loved hearing him say was that he doesn't look to last year as something that, like, he's almost forgotten about it. Like, he learned from it, but he's not hanging his hat on it. And I think for a guy like Rod, he needs to do that.
He said there's nothing to celebrate. I was like, dude, you're the second fastest person to ever run Western States.
It's a bold move.
For God's sakes, there's a lot to celebrate.
But I think it does honestly do well where we compare that to, you know, earlier we just spoke on Riley, where they're on a heater. Rod, you know, arguably had a pretty tough performance at Canyons, and I think that bodes well for him because he's never had to deal with the expectations of being basically the returning champ for all intents and purposes for this year. And so I think the fact that that takes some of that pressure off is going to allow him to execute the way he wants to. And he also highlights something that I'm really proud of him and his coach for, you know, kind of experimenting with, is backing off of the overall volume for like 6-7 hour long runs and focusing on the quality. And that's kind of like what you're referencing with Coach Hannah Allgood, where she only did a couple 50Ks leading up. And I think about like my own personal experience. My best races at UTMB were with the proper buildup with focused training. And I never did anything longer than a 50K in the prep. And I think with Rod, he has shown that with 4 to 5 hours of very specific, dedicated work and all the things that Corrine was talking about with the heat adaptation and the preparation and really, you know, almost being, I would say, one of the first to show us the importance of the hydration and the carb, you know, intake. I think that he has all the puzzle pieces. And then when you've got a pacer like he does, there's no way around it. Like, I feel like it's going to be
40 miles.
It's going to be the best looking duo on the course.
Dude, remember last year? So Tim's pulling Rod 38 miles the entire stretch from
I've been
Forest
training
Hill
for
to
this
the
for
finish.
360 days.
I love it. Dude, I remember on the broadcast when the whole thing was going down with Rod and Jim going along the sandy bottoms.
Was not freaking us out at all.
Oh my God. And then Tim's on camera at the river and you could just see you are so jacked up. I can't wait to see it again.
Unbelievable.
So good.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. It was amazing. And I think that Rod's coming back in that M2 bib, and that's a big deal. He had a breakout year last year. You have to remember that, you know, a year ago, he was on the development team contract at the North Face, and that contract expired like the day after Western States. And the man went on a sponsorship tour effectively in the weeks following his Western States performance and has landed with HOKA. And I think I'm really excited to see him don that M2 bib and make it happen. Was he wearing his Jim Walmsley bracelet yesterday?
I didn't check. But
he's been wearing that for a while.
Oh, since Canyons.
Highest returning finisher. The thing that sticks out from my conversation yesterday was I was like, hey, what are the memories burned in your mind from last year's race? And he was like, the moment I lost the race when Jim ran away from me. The dude's ready.
That highlights that he's learning to win.
Learning to win, exactly.
I mean, he's young and he hasn't had a lot of experience. He's had some really great performances, but
Theme of the week, printed on a T-shirt. Learning to win. All right. Other returning finishers, so we can keep the show moving here. Dan Jones, Caleb Olson, Chris Myers. Of these three, wouldn't be surprised. All three are on the podium. Personally, Dan Jones, we saw a race at Tarawera, an absolute savage. Caleb Olson, the fastest debut ever in Western States.
Yeah, I want to say that we overlook Caleb all the time. I feel like because he was only 5th at Western States last year.
Dude, he
1440. 1440.
And
Only
then
1440.
He kicked ass at Trans Gran Canaria, which is a very similar analogous course.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Chris Myers, a kid who I am very impressed by from Boulder, Colorado. He is a powerful man, a powerful runner.
Yes.
10th last year in like 15:13, a time that usually wins the race. He's, I think, only 28 years old still. Chris Myers has a lot of room to run in his career, and the dude is, I think, really fit and motivated coming in. And he's one of those names who is still, like, he's been top 10 here. He has a great resume of solid performances, but he's waiting for that, like, huge breakthrough. Chris Myers could be one of our big breakthrough stories this year after finishing M10 last year. Any other comments on those three before we keep moving on?
I think they're very much going to be in the mix. Again, it feels so weird to only have 4 of those M-bibs floating around out there this weekend, but they are 4 dudes who are looking to level up from last year.
And I think the final thing on that is that Rod said this in your conversation. Rod wants to be part of the race. He wants to help make the race, even if that risks him blowing up. And I think the gentlemen you just listed have very similar mindsets, and that's what it's going to take to really push this field all the way to where we want to see it go.
So cool. All right, so the internationals. A person named Killian Jornet, never heard of him. I think he's like a Catalan or something. He's in the race. We'll just
He's like run some stuff, I
check
guess.
that box.
No big deal.
I think he may have won Sierras and All like 11 times or something like that.
Like UTMB or something.
Zagama 30 times.
Yeah, I don't know. He like ran the entire Alps last year or something silly, but yeah. Some guy, yeah.
All right, so let me list them and then we can go around the
Data
horn.
3, maybe the most important attribute of Killian.
Yeah. All right, so internationals, Killian Jornet, Hannes Naberger, Peter Frano, Vincent Bouillard, Hiroki Kai. Let's go around the horn on the international runners here.
I mean, I just want to give some love to my boy Vincent. It's he's a guy I've known since 2017. It's a name that I think every American trail runner now knows after his incredible UTMB victory last year. But it wasn't a household name prior to that. But he has been out here in Auburn for the last few weeks, kind of scoping things out. And while it's his first time, you know, he's a young, hungry, very methodical athlete that has all of the skill sets to win this race. If you think about like what we described, it's a runnable, it's a mountain race. It has all these. Vincent has every single tool in the toolkit to do that. Obviously, first time out, it could be a challenge, but as Corrine said, sometimes the first time, that naivete is really nice because you don't know what you don't know. And Vincent does know that he's pretty much best friends with Jim, so he's unloaded all of that information from a decade of learning, and he's talked to a lot of great people. So I just want to give him flowers even before the race starts, just because I'm a fanboy of him. But I think that he's one that's going to be in the mix and might surprise some people out there.
Yeah, I think he shouldn't be a surprise. I also just want to like add some respect to that UTMB win, in part because I think it was easy for people to say, oh, everyone dropped out.
Exactly.
So,
But look at the time.
But no, that's the thing. I think the time, and again, we shouldn't really be a time-based sport because courses change every year and conditions are different, blah, 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 blah. But he ran a historically good time, one of the fastest times ever on the route.
Solo.
And yes, everyone dropped out.
Completely unknown.
But he ran, and again, he was quote unquote just a HOKA employee at that point in time. He's like the lead for a bunch of product innovation within HOKA, and I think that's really impressive. Also, want to add that I think people will look at his Chianti performance and be like, like wasn't that good? He got that ticket, but it felt really safe. No one else was really in the mix. He got super sick this winter going into that race, like super sick. Like I think had really bad norovirus or something. Lost a bunch of weight. And that man does not have weight to lose, I would add. And so I think that he went into that race maybe a little undercooked in a lot of ways due to being sick, not that far in advance of it. And so I think that he's been building back his strength, his endurance, and his speed all spring. And I think he's ready to have a really good day.
Totally. Okay, we got to keep the show moving here. So we all know, Tim, that Trail Fest to Gorge Waterfalls to UTMB pipeline exists. That was Vincent's progression in the sport. So we'll see if the Gorge Waterfalls or the Trail Fest to Gorge Waterfalls to UTMB to Western States pipeline is a thing here.
It's fact.
It's a fact. Hannes the Adonis Nomberger, the dude's as good as it comes, the German. We don't need to spend a ton of time on him, but he can do everything in this sport. He can win this race for sure. Peter Frano finished in a Hayden Hawks Adam Peterman Sando at CCC last year. In other words, he beat Adam Peterman at CCC, not far behind Hayden Hawks. I think he's still in his 20s, Slovakian kid.
Just won Transvolcania this spring in
Right.
really horrible conditions. The
Yep.
dude is tough. And I just think that he's a little bit of a wild card in this field,
Yep.
but I would expect that he could put something really special together.
Totally. Hiroki Kai, Japanese athlete. We always talk about him here. This is his symbol. He wears a GoPro on his hat. You got to follow him on YouTube.
He's raced like
You can watch his entire race.
he's raced like
probably.
40
Yeah.
times since we saw him at Tarawera. I'm
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
sure the dude is busy.
We
He's the
love-
Michael Wardian of our generation.
Well, we saw him
the
at
Japanese
Tarawera, and
generation.
when he got his golden ticket, he's over the moon. You can't help
Tears,
but root
just tears.
for
He was so
Hiroki Kai.
excited.
The ticket was literally bigger than he was at Tarawera. Okay, moving on here, and it's absolutely criminal that it's taken this long to talk about these two guys who I've listed under experienced contenders. A certain 2022 champion, Mr. Adam Peterman, a world champion. We just had him in studio. Dude is ready. You got to watch that interview. David Roche, of course, coming in, having, he's ready to take the biggest swing,
Maybe
the
fan
biggest
favorite
risks. Yeah.
coming in, I would say. He's brought a lot of hype in with him. He's had an amazing YouTube series that I think a lot of people have been following along with. I have to imagine come race day, which athlete will have the most spam in the chat?
Yeah.
It's got to be David Roche,
yeah, for
right?
sure.
The stands are going to be out cheering their guy on, and I think that is really cool. I think he's going to be a real factor in how the early part of the race goes out as well. He likes to push early. I think I think his strategy is that he feels very comfortable in the high country, and so I would not be surprised if he is out pushing the pace, bringing along Rod and Killian with him, et cetera. And I do think that he is going to be people are really, I think, going to be coming in to see how he does.
I mean, he's pretty much already called a shot. He's going hard over the top of the escarpment and through the high country, and that puts pressure on the entire field. Let's talk about, because we don't have time today, let's talk about the dynamic of the packs on Thursday. Let's make a note of that. But anyway, Adam Peterman is back. He is ready. He's a winner here. He has learned how to win, which has been the theme of the week. David Roche broke Matt Carpenter's course record at Leadville last year, which was seemingly untouchable, backed it up with another win at Javelina. He's 2 for 2 in his 100-mile career. Let's see if Roche can go 3 for 3. Final words as we wind down here. I've got a few dark horses in the men's race. I had no dark horses in the women's race because I just feel like it's so wide open and literally anybody can win. In the men's race, I just have a few names I want to shout out here. Adrian McDonald, 2-time Leadville champ. He was second behind David at Leadville last year in his fastest time. Very good 100-mile executor. He also won that Kosciuszko 100-miler in Australia. So Adrian McDonald, one of those names who nobody's going to talk about, but who I would put in my top 10 personally. Jeff McGavro, we just talked about him with Peterman, part of this Missoula posse. Corrine made the comment earlier that we think of him as a mountain guy, but really he's a fast guy. He can do it all. Jeff Browning is back. And then, of course, we talked about Dan Green and Harry Subertus, the Cocodona Western States double yesterday, but those are my dark horses. Go ahead.
And then I just want to add Hans Troyer to that mix because he's 25, and we had an audience question at our men's elite panel for Black Canyon, and the question was, who are you most afraid to race this weekend? And people were kind of like, well, I guess everyone up here, but one of the guys was like, Hans Troyer, because that man has nothing to lose. The kid races like he has nothing to lose, and I would anticipate that if anyone's going out hot,
He's like the Tara Dower
Hans
for the
is
men.
sticking right on them. So expect big things from Hans Troyer.
Great point. All right, we got to come up with a nickname for Hans. And then the other thing that we actually skipped over here that you reminded me of, because Hans was in the debut bucket. This is Hans's first 100-miler. It's Peter Frano's first 100-miler. And also it's Seth Ruling's first 100-miler.
Oh my God, we almost didn't even mention Seth.
We talked about Seth.
we would not hear the end of that.
In
yep.
relationship to
You're
Riley
the boy.
Brady, right? Seth is on an absolute heater. Course record at Black Canyon, course record at the Canyons 50K. The Boulder Boys, it's the year of the boy, as they say. Seth is one of those guys who loves to race aggressively. He's got all the talent that you need to win this race. He's coming in with a lot of momentum. But again, it's like one of those things of like, when you have that momentum, just make sure it doesn't make you get overly confident to where you make your own mistakes and get in your own way.
Yeah, I mean the debutantes in the men's field are super interesting with Peter Frano, Hans Troyer, Seth Ruling in particular, because I think that they are probably three of the most talented men in the field from like a raw running capability, and that is like, I think that's very special.
Yeah. Okay. So Harmony just texted me. It's Tara the Terrifying Dower, Tara the Terror Dower, or Terrifying Dower. We'll workshop it. And Hans the Destroyer Troyer.
Yeah, Troyer the Destroyer.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you, chat, for that. Thank you, Harmo.
Yeah, don't take all the credit.
All right. Final comments on our official preview show. We covered a lot here today. We'll cover more on Thursday, including how we expect it to play out. Let's make sure we talk about that because there's a rich conversation to be had. But any closing comments from the panel here?
Get your popcorn ready.
Is there a transcendent truth here?
Oh man, I should be ready for these. Yeah, what do I gotta say? Yeah, let's go with like. I want to remind everyone, whether you're in the race or just listening to us, that rock bottom is wherever you decide to stop digging. Like, this sport is hard. Western States is hard. We don't always get the dream day that we dreamt of, but if you're in this race, I want any of our 369 runners on Saturday to make a pact with us, with their loved ones, with their competitors, that if you find yourself in that proverbial low spot, that you put your shovel down and you take the next step. You know, like you really owe it to yourself to take the chance that you have. It's a gift to be at Western States. You know, so if you're coming up to Michigan Bluff, you know, a little after the expected time, or if you're going down Cal Street, stumbling along in the dark with a headlamp and a pacer, or if you're sitting, I don't know, at Point of Rocks watching the sunrise, like kind of having a little pity party, like put that shovel down, take another step, and until you cross the finish line at the track or get timed out, don't stop taking those steps.
Love it. Tim's transcendent truths. And it reminds me of the sunrise at Pointed Rocks last year with my guy, Ryan Thrower. What a perfect place to close. Corinne, anything from you?
No, I mean, I think obviously we spent a lot of time talking about the elites, and we're going to talk about them a lot more in the coming days. But I think we're all just very excited to hand out a lot of buckles on Sunday and welcome you to the track and be in tears and get to spend some time together.
Oh, it's freaking Western States Week. I am still reeling from the Topher Gaylord keynote speech at TrailCon today. It's freaking here. That's your official Free Trail preview. Before we go, a couple of reminders. Smash that subscribe button if you don't mind. Click all the buttons that help us out. We would really appreciate it if you follow along all of our coverage here for Western States Week and throughout the summer racing season. Go play fantasy, fantasy.freetrail.com. Pick 10 deep for the men and women. Again, check out that splits feature I mentioned at the top of the show. You're going to want to have that bookmarked for all day on Saturday. It's an amazing way to do real-time analysis of the splits on race day. Tomorrow we'll be back at 3:30 p.m. with the Champions Edition. Again, our guests are going to be Jim Walmsley, Scott Jurek, Hal Kerner, Magda Boulay, and Kat Bradley. A total of 15 Cougar trophies among that bunch. It's going to be a sick show. Again, going live 3:30 tomorrow. Thursday, HOKA Shakeout Run if you're in Palisades, 7:30 here at the Coffeebar in the morning. Thursday evening, 5 p.m. immediately after our final show here, we got the Chuck Wagon Beer Mile, followed by the 100-mile happy hour, brought to you by your friends at Freetrail and Death March Running Co. Go check out hoka.com, grab a pair of those Mafate X shoes, and finally, and most importantly, a big thank you to the team who makes it happen. My guy, Mr. Ryan Thrower, you're an absolute legend, buddy. I love you. Harmony, you're an absolute legend. Thank you for all you do. I love you too.
We love you, Harmony.
We got great athlete interviews up on our YouTube now. Go check those out. And we've got a bunch scheduled over the next couple of days also. So stay locked and loaded. For Tim Tollefson, Corinne Malcolm, I'm Debo. Peace out.